Such a glowing introduction is terrifying. I really come from much more humble origins. We were looking for a school for our children and didn't like anything we found. And I had been a public school teacher and I loved teaching, and I knew that I was looking for something more. And I couldn't define it. I just felt it, that there was a quality that education could be imbued with. And when we enrolled our son in a Waldorf preschool kindergarten, and the school at that time was, as almost all schools start out as, renting kindergarten room space in a church. And I walked into this room, and it was institutional green walls. There was a dollhouse and a knitted gnome. That's all I remember. That's all I remember about the room. Except as soon as I stepped in there, I did that because I felt something rush up and down my back. And I said, there's something these people know, and I want to know what it is. And then I never thought that I would be lucky enough to become an actual Waldorf teacher. For a long time, for 10 years, I said I taught in a Waldorf school because I couldn't claim to be a Waldorf teacher. Because that seems that, well, it is still a very lofty aspiration that we're all really struggling to do. But I came to this as a parent. We were looking for something for good and healthy for our children. And that's been my introduction from the very beginning. And then that I get to be lucky enough to teach in this endeavor is an unexpected, astonishing blessing of my life. So we had four children now, all adult, all married, who are all Waldorf educated. And we have 5 1/3 grandchildren, one due in late June. And those who are on the planet are all being Waldorf educated. If we can just figure out the financing. So it has been such an enormous blessing to our lives to be involved with this, both as a family, individually, professionally, all of these various things. That the more I study and the more experience I have, and I'm extremely fortunate that I get to travel a great deal and visit many Waldorf schools. And it just gets better and better and better, and more amazing and more inspiring. And I find, I have to apologize in advance because I can tend to get too excited about this. And so I'm going to try to be really professional. I'm not optimistic. I haven't succeeded yet. But what I hope to share with you is enough information that, one, about what stands behind this topic, what stands behind healthy human development that we're striving to support for our children so that they have a really good chance at living satisfying lives. I'm consciously not saying successful, because that's a very complicated word, but satisfying lives on many, many, many levels. And I hope to give you as many practical ideas as our time allows, and help you to feel really happy and affirmed in your choice of Waldorf education. Because I've looked at many, many educational systems. I taught in the public schools, and of all the things I have encountered and studied about, this one is the one that has the widest embrace to really help to grow a whole human being. Really does. So this is the plan for this evening and tomorrow. So tonight, I'm going to give you enough introduction. Now I know that some people can only be here this evening and are unable to come tomorrow, when we really will get to flesh these things out and make it very experiential. But I want to give enough tonight, and I have to give a framework of a foundation so that we can hang pieces on it tomorrow, And that also for those people who are here only for the evening will actually walk away with something in their hands and not just say, that was just a teaser. Well, it will be anyway, but I'm going to send you out the door with some really concrete things that you can actually, if it resonates with you, that you can use with your own children. So we'll be talking about that. And you've seen up here, to save time, I've written these things in advance. These are a listing of different senses, the construct of the senses that Rudolf Steiner, who is the founder of Waldorf education, scientist and philosopher in the early part of the century, he was born in 1861, died in 1925, who's given all the impulses and all the insights out of which Waldorf education has grown. He talked about this construction of sensory experience that the human being, all of us, live in, which is rather different than what we might. That when I was in school, there were only 5 senses, and now he's got 12 there, and so that takes a little bit of entering into to figure out what is he talking about, and then these 4 foundational senses I've written up here because this is going to be the focal point of what we're really talking about with building a foundation for the rest of life. Now that sounds really a lofty thing to say. Well, it is. But it's also true, and I mean it absolutely literally. And I hope to share with you ideas and insights that will support this assertion. So we get a bit of picturing of this sensory thing. And then I have handouts for us that we'll pass out here in a little while, so that those of you who are just here tonight, take the whole thing, read it, watch the video. And there are 2 sheets of absolutely practical suggestions that I will explain. So, and then tonight, so as you leave, you'll have an idea of what it is that's being offered to you. And then tomorrow we will work with these things. Now, tomorrow I see everybody's guests dressed quite casually, and so we will be out in the common area there, moving at various times. We'll breathe back and forth between sitting, thinking, and moving, and experiencing, and you will have the opportunity to roll on the floor. I don't know if the cleaners will have gotten here before us tomorrow.
They say they are supposed to get here tonight.
Okay.
The floors will be clean.
All right. Even so, just so don't wear your best duds tomorrow, because we want to be able to move with as little inhibition as you feel that you want to risk. Okay. All right. And so then tomorrow we will really enter into a consideration of these particular senses. Because our sense of security in our bodies, our sense of safety in our bodies and in our environment, the foundation for our emotional and psychological health, all lie here. And that's huge, a huge contemplation to enter into. But I want to start us off with the young child. Now, if you have a child in an early childhood classroom, or if you've had a child in a kindergarten class where you have your child's birthday has been celebrated, you have been honored with the birthday story. Now, the birthday story varies from teacher to teacher and from school to school, but there's a common thread, the common images that come in these stories. And what's customarily pictured is that some distant place, perhaps another garden someplace, perhaps a golden castle, someplace that's really a delightful place to be, where there are lots and lots of children playing. And they live in such nice harmony and such a sense of protection and well-being that one would think, why would anybody ever want to leave there? It's a really nice place to be. But then there's a child who might climb to the top of the castle and peer out of a window and see some distant land. And in that distant land, he or she might see two people who the child recognizes and saying, I know them. And I've talked to them in the stars. And we agreed that I would come to them and that they will be my parents. Because this is such a nice place, but when I see that distant place, my heart longs to go there. There are experiences and adventures that I can have there that will help me to grow into the most developed, the child wouldn't say developed, but the most rich and full human being that I could become. And here, I have a lovely, lovely time, but I have to go there to be a human being. And so, somehow or another, a whisper or something comes to the ear, to the heart of that potential mother and father, and they think it's their idea to have a child. Some of us have been surprised to say, that wasn't my idea. But somehow or another, there it goes. And the child embarks upon a journey and then ends up in the arms of the mother and the father. And hence begins an earthly life. Now, in order to get there, the child has had to go on a journey, and somewhere or another, maybe in a boat on the back of a great white eagle, there's such a thing, an albino eagle, I guess it would have to be, being carried by the wind. Who knows how the child will get to this new place? But there's a form of movement. A form of movement. And what has already happened in the pregnancy and in utero, it's in very, very subtle ways, but that little child that was up there in the heavens somehow or another is moving in to the body that's growing there in the mother's womb. And I think and so then in the first years of life, we really, as early childhood educators, we emphasize upon the first 7 years of life as being a time that is unlike any other time that will happen. This is where the opportunities for development are perfect in terms of timing. And the child accomplishes the greatest deeds that a human being will accomplish in the first 3 years of life completely unconsciously. The child is trying to figure out, how do I get into that body? How do I move in? Because this physical body is my new house. It's my new house. And if you've moved into a new house, a new apartment, a new something or another, at least one different to you, well, it's nice, but it's not your home. It takes a lot of customizing to make it your home. And a lot of moving pieces of furniture around. And hanging a drape there, this, that. Until finally, you've achieved an arrangement of it that you feel comfortable and secure, and that somehow or another that there's a balance. I guess you're doing we're doing our own internal feng shui in arranging all of our various pieces so that they will work together well, and that one part will support the other part, and find its way into becoming a wholeness, a unity. Now, when you see a little tiny newborn baby, besides just being transported into ecstasy, we just walk into the room where a baby is. You haven't even seen the baby, and you can already feel a glow, and you can smell, that baby smell. How do they do that? It's not baby lotion. It's baby-ness. And so the baby, like this kind of, and then if they waken, been sleeping and they're hungry or they're cold or they're pooed or something like that, and then they start to cry and they have all this chattery movement, very, very erratic, uncontrolled movement, and over which the baby has no control. The baby's at the mercy of the body and cannot really do anything intentionally except cry, but the cry isn't even an intention yet. It's just what happens as an expression of their state of being. And then little by little, the baby starts to gain control of some portions of the body. And this happens through, it's called an angelic gift, which are the infantile reflexes or movement patterns with which the baby is born. And these are amazing things that, depending on how the head moves, the rest of the body will move in a stereotyped way. And the baby cannot not move that way unless it has neurological damage. So, for example, just to give you an idea. So one is, so I'm theoretically lying on my back, and I'm like this, and my head drops to the right, and my body goes like that. My head goes and looks at my hand, and the arm extends, and my leg sticks out, and then my head comes back, and then I curl back in again. I'll do the same thing on the left, like that. That is some of the first controlled movement that's not chattery. And that and various other reflex patterns guide the child into starting to find their sense of control and orientation in space. I'm going to use this word orientation in space, or this phrase, a ton of times. And it has all to do with what we call the balance or the vestibular system. And tomorrow we'll dive deeply into that realm. But in the ear, there are three little canals, three semicircular canals that stand at right angles to each other. And one goes this way, and one goes that way, and one goes that way. And so the orientation of these three canals shows right and left, above and below, and front and back, the three different planes of space. And so what the child is striving to do is to find that sense of balance where all of those things meet in a kind of a central point that you can stand there and say, yeah, I can stand up, and I feel secure, and I feel okay. Well, so the young child is doing that physically, and then we keep on trying to do that on more and more subtle levels. In our emotional life, do I feel balanced? Have I got those three sets of directions kind of okay? So that psychologically and emotionally I feel secure and resilient. How do I feel about my own self-concept? Do I feel balanced? Do I feel secure? Do I feel resilient? And what about the more subtle parts of ourselves? Okay. What I ask you to do, to just quietly think in your own mind. What am I? How do I define myself? Just got to give yourself a little list. Well, I'm da 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 da. Okay. Now, with what you were able to do in those 30 seconds, does that explain who you are? Do you feel satisfied? I hope not. Or I might as well leave now and you can go home and not have a big babysitting bill. No. And so we could keep trying to refine and define that and get to more and more subtle aspects of ourselves. Because what was up there in the heavens with the child was really the essence of that individual's beinghood. And that's kind of indefinable. It's elusive, it's ineffable, it's eternal, it's magnificent, it's huge, it's minute, it's all of those things all at the same time. And that's us too. And any kind of external definition or description that we can give to ourselves, all of those are also true, but that's not it. And so we're always striving to get to the it part of ourselves. It's kind of like, I sort of think like a spiral, that the child starts out, we all started out on the spiral of the physical, and then we kind of get hunkered into that and say, yeah, okay, I can go out into the world. And then we come more then into the realm of feelings and emotions and soul life. And you start to figure out, well, how do I encounter the world? What's my relationship to the world at large? Which we find our way through the senses, which we'll get to pretty quickly here. And then we go on into something that's ever so much more complicated than that, and that is that we actually have to relate to other human beings. So in our adult lives, we have lots of challenges, but mostly it's there. It's in this social domain, in our relationships. And as we see how the world is reeling, I won't say out of control, but dangerously, erratically processing through time here, that it's in the realm of relationships that we are challenged on absolutely every single level. Every single level. And so, it starts here. And what is accomplished in terms of health here is going to lay the foundation not only for academic learning, for athleticism, physical coordination, all those things that are kind of obvious and observable and even testable kind of thing, but it's going to lay the foundation because, as I said, the balance that we achieve physically lays the structure upon which our emotional capacity for balance will be able to be anchored. And how that affects so much how we can interact socially and in relationships, because we're working out the relationship with ourself in these first senses. Then we're working out the relationship through smell, taste, sight, and warmth with the world out there, just the world. And then here, hearing words, thought, and I, thou, which we'll explain, is about with others, the whole social realm. So it's a lot. It's so much that is influenced and supported or unsupported by what happens in the first 7 years of a child's life. Now, it is said that it is through the senses. And it's interesting too, because there are all kinds of wisdom when you start to read these kinds of things, and if you have any interest in astrology and the zodiac and planetary influences and so on, we see that people have put special emphasis or what do I want to say? That there are particular numbers that keep coming round again, round and round and round. And the number 12 is one of these. So there are 12 months, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 senses. And this is not only Rudolf Steiner's perception, but there have been connections with various parts of the body and the zodiac forever. And thousands of years. And so there seems to be kind of a lawfulness or perhaps a truthfulness about that. Why these things keep coming back again and again and again. And so these senses are, again, we can look at those as another benevolence given to us. And I should just tell you what I'm assuming that you will follow me with. And if you don't, then just let it drop over there and pretend that you are, so you don't discourage me. Okay. One thing is that, of course, within Waldorf education, it's a given that there's a spiritual world, and that we come from there, And we may go back to there, and we bring things with us from there. And as we come from there, we pass through lots of influences, and we pick up gifts from the zodiac, and we pick up gifts from the planetary realms. And one of these major gifts, or this cluster of gifts, are these senses. And the senses are what allow us to come into relationship with the physical life. So let's think about a baby being born. So in utero, the baby has already been having several sensory experiences on such a sleepy level that, of course, it doesn't register as a sense. But the baby hears and becomes accustomed to the sound of the mother's voice. It's muffled, but hears it. The baby really doesn't feel anything because they're in the amniotic fluid. They begin to feel cramped, and then the mother feels the baby feeling cramped. So there's that. But then one of the first real experiences that the baby has is when the labor begins and the uterine contractions begin to massage the baby and wake up and tone the baby's sensory systems. Lots of things happen because then touch is wakened and kind of primed for the great, astonishing, glorious shock of coming out of the birth canal into all of this sensory experience. Like, ha! And so all of that, those uterine contractions in the labor, helps the baby kind of get ready. Okay, I'm building up. All right, I can do this. And start to feel themselves. So they come out. And so they've already had a bit of hearing experience and then touch. Then they come out and it's cold. However warm the room is, it's going to feel cold to that baby. And so then the child has an experience then of what Steiner talks about as warmth or temperature. We'll talk about that. And then, what do they do? The baby also has been experiencing balance. Okay, moms, remember when you were about like this? And you didn't want to walk like that, but you didn't have a choice. Okay. And so what's happening for the baby is the sense of balance is being toned up. It's one of the first sensory systems that's fully, what they call fully myelinated at birth. It means it's fully functional. And it's been through the mother's movement then, that has been being educated because it's movement that educates that sense. Now, it can be, if something has happened that the mom needs to go on bed rest, and what we know is that the most important thing in the world is to get that baby here. And so sometimes then bed rest is just what's needed. But then there will be some lack of experience here because the mom has had to be still. Yeah, which as teachers, that's an interesting thing and a helpful thing for us to know as we're meeting children, because that we may see an influence of that in the child's behavior and the child's sensory development. So that's been going on. And then there's the sound and that they've heard, and that the baby will recognize the mother's voice. And the baby will recognize the mother's heartbeat. And so there are all of these things that when the baby comes out and is surrounded by these familiar experiences, that the baby can feel secure and reassured. And so that's the beginning of this sense of, okay, I've left my starry domain. I've left the comfort, security, and safety of my mother's womb, and now I'm going to have to build it up all over again. But there are these anchors there that will help me and reassure me that, boy, this is a big trip. This is really a big trip, but it's the right one, and it's a good one for me to make. So then we see that the baby goes through then a whole bunch of other development. And so through the reflexes, and then the baby lying on the back and bringing the hands up, and then suddenly, what's that? You know, is that a toy? What is that? Not having any sense that it's themselves. But little by little then coming to explore the body, to gain control of the movement of the body from the head down, and from center out. Arms moving finally down to here, when we know that the fingertips are the last ones to become controllable. And we look for that pincer grasp to come along. And then I'm doing developmental screenings in my school right now. So we're looking for fine motor skills and all of that. So the baby starts with these very simple movements. Rolls over, big accomplishment. The amusement of not being able to crawl, but to kind of locomote across the floor without meaning to, and you get over there and you go to turn and your head's stuck underneath the chair, and then you hear a shrieking child to go and extricate him or her out of that. Finally, sitting up, crawling and or pulling up. We have in our family, pulling up came before crawling. And saying, little devil, you're not supposed to do it that way, but okay. Finally, to uprightness, to being able to stand, to move, to walk. That you watch a little one walk across the floor. We were at an engagement party, and I hate parties and having to be social. So I always focus on the children. And there was this little toddler, he wasn't even a toddler, he was just a year old, and a lot of people were there, and so he would go up and I was watching him, and then he'd disappear. And then he'd fall down, and then you'd just see his little red head plop up and he'd toddle on again. You know, absolutely indefatigable, wouldn't give upable, not a cry, not a nothing. This drive to become a human being, to stand up. And she is working all the time with these senses of balance and self-movement, as well as touch. These are these enormous gifts that allow the child to step into earthly life. And we want them to be healthy. And there are ways that we can support them in being healthy. And we need to know of ways to support them in being healthy, because life has changed so fast and so dramatically since I was a child, which was a long time ago. And even my own children, you know, our eldest is early 40s, the youngest is 32. How much the world has changed since their childhood, and I truly say my prayers of gratitude, because our particular family was growing up just ahead of the technological explosion. And the kinds of influences that are so ordinary now, my children were protected from and guarded from. And so their health is a lot stronger than what can happen without our assistance now. I mean, for example, I was in the classroom this morning and some children were playing gnomes. And one of the children said, "Guys, we're gnomes. We don't have cell phones or iPads." Okay. Yes. So, what I want to do now, okay, I want you to all put your things down. I want you to stand up, please. Because we can't understand anything that we have not experienced. Rudolf Steiner. Okay. So this is not threatening, but you are the only three at risk because you don't have a chair in front of you, but I think you'll make it. Okay. So what I want you to do, stand on one foot. Okay. Oh, excellent. Okay. Rest. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing, but as soon as you are steady, then close your eyes. I'm going to watch you. I'm not going to close my eyes. Don't cheat. okay, the ocean is way, here we go. Okay. All right. Now, I want you to nod your head about 10 times. Or unless you can't go that long, stop. Then I want you to waggle your head back side to side about 10 times. Okay. How's your tummy feeling? And then I want you to twist your head. Okay. How do you feel? Dizzy. Yeah. Good. It means your vestibular system is functioning well. What we were also doing is that standing on one foot, we're testing our balance, and we're seeing, because here's the thing that's so interesting. Balance is the ability to be stable while you're still. It's not being a super skier. And so, okay, you can sit down for the moment. It's, when I started doing therapeutic support work, and I would see children who were referred to me, and Mr. Eichler lives deeply into this, as this kid can't sit still, driving me crazy, tipping the chair, waggle, 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 can't shut up, moving all the time. So typically that child I would see, I think I have a good idea what I'm going to find. Very, very, very inefficient vestibular sensing. Child, it's like, okay, this is the best comparison I've had so far. It's like having a tapeworm in your inner ear. That we inform ourselves about what our balance is like by subtle movement. So because I know about this, I'm aware that I move a lot, but not so dramatically that I hope that I drive anybody crazy or distract you because I'm moving. But what it does is that my sensory system is really pretty efficient, and so I can move a small amount and get enough information in my through my senses to reassure me that where I am, that I know I'm upright, and I kind of know where my balance is. But for a child whose balance system does not register efficiently, that child has to keep feeding it with movement constantly. Because as soon as they are still, it's as though they're lost in space and they don't know where they are. So they have to constantly keep moving. And so then I meet with the parents, and the dad says, but you should see him skateboarding. Can he ever ski and run like the dickens? And I say, I know, it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But that just demonstrates that his balance is poor. Because true balance is being able to be secure and satisfied and stand still and feel your own security. So this is an incredibly important sense, because it does give us our sense of where we are, and that we're one person, and that even if I walk across the room, I'm still the same me that I was when I started over there. This whole thing called sensory integration, it's an experience of a sensory integrity, that all your experiences through your bodily senses and what you see out in the world are consistent enough that you can count on it, and you'll have the same experience time after time after time. Now, don't want to lose my place here. So that the child is going through all of this organizing, and then has to go through refinement. And it all happens through moving. Except I have to confess, I didn't think it was possible, but someone was talking about their child learning to ride a two-wheeler. Well, I don't know how to learn how to ride a two-wheeler except being unsuccessful at riding a two-wheeler, and you try and you try and you try and you try and you try. But one family swore that they got the video about how to learn how to ride a two-wheeler, And their child was successful. Now, I don't know if the child, I doubt that the child watched the video and said, okay, now I got it. I know what to do. I really doubt that. But I think probably the parents learned supportive gestures and a way to break down the different pieces of learning to balance and ride a two-wheeler into discrete steps so that they could coach, something like that. But so we're trying it constantly to refine these things and to bring all of these things into cooperation with one another through movement, primarily through movement, so that we've got a really good foundation to step out upon or from into the world of experience. And so we, okay, before I step into really talking about these and giving you definitions for them, at which time here, we'll just start these things around. And we'll just do one sheet at a time. I guess there are 5 of them. Now I've lost my way. All right. So let's talk about these to start with. Now, touch, which is also called the tactile sense, which is what the mainstream describes. We know what that one is. You know. Touch, all of that. But one of the things that Rudolf Steiner described, and so that will come around in this one, is he says, yes, we do experience the outside world through touch, but the more important thing is that we experience boundary. We experience where we stop and the rest of the world starts. This is really important because I'm sure it's a common phrase now. Well, you've overstepped your boundary, or that child really has boundary issues, or our neighbor, hopeless, always overstepping boundaries, always in our space. And so it's through touch that we have that experience to start with. And it's very, very important, both because for your own sense of where your space is, that's inviolable, that no one else can transgress. So that your own private space, your own sense of safety, security, and you know where the limits are. It's also important because then if you experience your own limits and your own boundaries, then you begin to experience that other people have those too. And it's a huge, huge, huge prerequisite there for social life. To begin to sense both my own space and my own boundaries and that of other people. And where I have overstepped my boundary and intruded upon someone else's space, which is harder to notice that somebody has entered into your space. Today, during the puppet play, 2 little girls, just, you couldn't see that anything had happened. I think it was more like it's sort of one little girl went like that, and the other one, who's obviously super sensitive, felt the wave of the air as an assault. But for that child who went, it was true. It really was true. So to have an appreciation of that is a big thing. It really is. So this touch sense, and we have, which we'll go into tomorrow, there are lots of touch disturbances. And we talk about somebody being, well, boy, isn't she touchy? Or so on. Touch is not as healthy as it used to be. There are a lot of reasons why that might be so. But that we see children are super sensitive to textures, to fibers, so that. I didn't know this myself, but when I was a child, I have great tactile sensitivity that I didn't know until I was almost 50 years old. And I would have to suffer through wearing clothes that had been starched. Boy, was that the old days. and that would give me hives. But that's what it was. And you just did what you did, and you wore what you were given to wear, and that was how it was. And now we have our children this has become even more intensified. There are more children born with really true, legitimate tactile sensitivities. And if you have one of those, oh, I'm so sorry. Because your life is a lot harder. My niece could have actually been a textbook case for sensory integration dis-ease. And my sister spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on socks and underwear that the Goodwill benefited from immediately, because our niece absolutely couldn't bear the experience of those things. It was real. It was not a prima donna kind of a thing. It was a true sensory experience. So we come to experience the world through our touch. Now this sense of life, sense of well-being, this is really a hard one to wrap your mind around. When Steiner is talking about these as senses, he means that there is within our physical body and our nervous systems sensory organs through which we have experiences. And that we nose, eyes, ears, semicircular canals, our skin, those sorts of things, mouth for taste. Those are obvious ones, but then these other organs are more mysterious and internal, so we really can't kind of measure it in the laboratory or x-ray it. But he says that there really is an experience of well-being, and we don't even know that we have it unless we don't feel well, or if we feel tired, if we have a headache, kind of, your digestion is off, things like that. And but it really, he says, it is a sense. And the way we support that one is not really through movement, but I will talk about that tomorrow. It's more through rhythmic life, predictability. So that the body rhythms, which we're generally unaware of, but they keep humming along. And then, of course, we know that there are things that happen to us every single day that throw our rhythms off. And, you're late for school, or there's an accident on your way, and then, you forgot your lunch, and all these little things, or Sally won't play with me today. All those things which knock us off. And if the sense of life is not well supported in all the wide ways that we can of predictability, rhythm, routine, to give the sense a chance, the experience and the assurance that yes, things will get knocked off, but then we'll get back to the hum. That's when we get really anxious children, because they never know what to anticipate, and they never know what they can count on or they can't count on. And that, here's where we're helping to support that. Then we get to self-movement proprioceptive sense. Now, it's not the ability to move, not that at all. What it is, it's that we can sense, in our own bodies, we can sense that we have moved. And we can sense how the body, all the pieces of the body relate to one another in an organized way. So what we experienced proprioception when we were doing this, and I will close my eyes at risk here, because my balance is not so good anymore. And I'm not quite yet falling over, because my proprioception is helping compensate for where my balance is not being able to stay upright. And I can adjust those things. And how can I do that? I don't think, okay, hip move there, and it's not a thought process at all. It's an automatic ability, but the only way I know how to move is because I have sensors in my joints that tell me what the position is and tell me then what amount of movement, distance, and so on that I have to move to adjust my balance to keep from falling over. And inside all of our joints, there are these little muscle nerve spindles called proprioceptors, hence this long name that I stood in front of the mirror and I brushed my teeth. Proprioception, proprioceptive, over and over and over again, so I didn't feel silly saying it out loud. Because as a professional, we have to be able to say these things without embarrassment. Okay, but that's what this is talking about. So now, where do we see this in our children? Well, forgive me, I'm not being sexist, but we see it in our tumbly boys. Is where we see it because, okay, for myself, so if we look at ourselves as though we're musical instruments, and so are you a bass, kind of big and bongy, or are you a cello, are you a viola, are you a violin? And so we can sort of sense what our own stringing tension is in our own bodies. And sometimes the tension is too loose. And so when that's true, and it's not, it's not a personality defect, it's just a physical fact that some of us have really tight stringing, and some of us are very loose, and some of it, and everything in between. But, so this morning out there in the play yard, boys started to dogpile. Proprioception seekers. What it means is, so the amount of tension that you have in the joint that's applied either by pulling on it or pushing on it, that kind of a thing, lets you know where that part of your body is. If you're really loose, it takes an enormous amount of pressure in there to get, okay, for me, I'm really tight, so it doesn't take too much here for me to know where my finger is. But if we're really loose, and I met a boy a couple weeks ago, he just wondered, the admiration after I got to really see this child in movement, where he looks like such a, and then I saw him just before circle eurythmy, it was eurythmy, and he's 6 years old. And I said, well, what an attitude, looking at it externally and very superficially and unfairly. When I saw the challenges that this boy has in moving his body in any organized way, I just had to say, you dear child, how hard you have to work to do what you do. What you have accomplished is astonishing, and the world thinks that you're a klutz. Really unfair. So, if you're very loosely strung, and it's not exclusively to boys, but it's mostly boys, that carry this burden of having to need so much impact into the body, into the joints, to have any sense of, oh, there's my arm. There it is. And they push and they pull and they tug. And you say, well, what, that aggressive child. No. He's over here and he doesn't know where the arm is. Do I still have it? And the only way you'll get it is like that. And then you hope that it's not Sally Sensitive that he's holding hands with. Often it is. So, the teachers, we really do have to be a little strategic in how we partner them up or allow them to be. So that's proprioception. And this is also a sense, out of that we get a sense of body geography. Because it's not a given. What's happening, especially those of you who may be working with threes and unders, helping them get dressed. We've had quite some conversations these 2 days that I've been here about how much longer the day needs to be in order to allow the children the time they need to learn the self-sufficiency of dressing. I mean, that is a pedagogical task all by itself. It's huge. And you say, okay, put your arm back here, put your arm in the sleeve. Arm? What arm? We've all been there with our children. And of course, they have no experience, and it's through proprioception and experience of movement again and again and again and again and again and again that the child starts to have the sensory experience of how to organize the movement. Putting your arm in a sleeve is a very complex accomplishment. It really is. If you think about it, all the different things that you're having to figure out, you've got with the shoulder, the elbow, the angling, the twist of the wrist, all of those things, it's a lot. It's really a lot, and it takes a lot of experience in order to get there. And the world, just because the way it's developing, and technological ease, no need to do any real work. I just came from New York City. Talk about being challenged there, because the children all live in buildings, and the doorman lets them in, and the maintenance people shovel all the snow, and the cleaners clean the rooms, and the deli cooks the dinner and rings the buzzer so you know dinner has arrived. What does one do? Really, what's left to do there? And for children, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge for families there. And I'm not being facetious, and I'm not being judgmental, truly. When I see the complications of how families are struggling and striving to raise their children in a healthy way, because we all want that. If there's nothing else in the world that we want a good life for our children. We can sacrifice tons of other things for ourselves, but we want a good life for our children. And the opportunities there for children to be able to move in ways that help them get this healthy, secure, confident body to build the rest of their life upon is very, very limited. Very limited. So that's what self-movement is about. It's then again, so let's say we go to riding the bicycle again. You've managed to put on your coat, you can get your boots on. Again, this sense of ordering. A little girl yesterday put her mittens on and then wanted her coat on. and so I said, it's easier if the coat, usually the mittens come on after the coat. I like it this way. So I helped her minimally with the coat, and then it's what Dr. Blanning was studying, the constitutional polarities of how we all come into life in certain inclinations, and some of us are kind of a bit thick, and then we burst out. And so I said, okay, this is going to be, excuse me, the term is epileptic. This is going to be an epileptic coat explosion. So, and then we looked down and she didn't have her snow pants on. So we had to start all over again. But anyway, how do you order a movement? How do you figure out? It's kind of like the closest I think that we can come as adults is learning to drive a standard transmission of a car, which I hear is maybe fading out to nothing. So we have to keep our cars forever. We're not, we're getting old. We'll probably make it. But if you remember the agony, if you learn to drive a standard shift, I still remember being caught in a dip about that little, and I could not get that damn car out of there. Excuse me, edit that out. I could still be there, and even now, if I'm on a hill, I gotta pop that clutch out so fast, because I'm still terrified we're gonna roll back. So all of the things that you have to figure out to do that. So it's like everything that a child is learning how to do is like that for us as adults. And it doesn't come naturally. You have to have experience, and you have to have lots and lots and lots of opportunity to practice things over and over and over and over and over again in order to get it, so that you don't have to think about it. So we've talked a bit about balance, and while self-movement gives us an experience of the the relationship of our body parts to itself and our body organization in the limbs. Balance, the vestibular sense, gives us our sense of our relationship in our orientation to the Earth's gravity, to the Earth. So we're going on. We're getting more and more external and more vast in our orientation. Starting here with touch was really very, very intimate and enclosing. And then life, which is an organic sense, the hum of health and well-being that we experience inside ourselves. Nobody else can experience that of us or for us, although we can make educated guesses as we look at one another and as we look at the children to say, how's their life sense today? Are they rosy? Are they pale? What's their energy like? Are they lethargic? Are they, etc. Like that. Self-movement we can see more because then we're really moving out into the limbs more. However, the experience of our movement we experience inwardly, though the effect of our movement is experienced outwardly by our classmates and by our parents, because we're really stepping out. And then the balance system, the vestibular, is one that is really then recognizing us as a human being standing on the earth. And that sense of relationship there. Now, I only once in my life, and I'm so grateful it's happened only once, had an experience of vertigo. If you've ever, or many of us, most of us probably have had at least one episode of motion sickness. And I meant this. I had 4 children, and I was so ill that I said, we were driving mountain roads, getting on a camping vacation, and when we finally stopped, I said, pitch the tent, fast. I got in there, and I lay still. I didn't care if they had dinner. I didn't care about anything. And at that moment, I really didn't care if I lived or died. I mean, I know that sounds extreme, but I meant it. I felt so ill and so disoriented. And the moment that I had this experience of vertigo, I was tying a child's shoe, and I leaned over in a chair, tying the shoe, and suddenly the world swirled out of control. And it couldn't have been more than a couple of seconds. But I was pitching through space, and I had no sense about whether I was upside down, right side up, anything at all. I was totally lost, and it was terrifying. That's the most extreme example. Physicians are warned that if they have patients who have vestibular disturbance, to be very, very cautious with them, because one needs to be aware and attentive to any inclination toward suicide, because it can become so intolerable that the people truly feel that they can't stand it. Imagine a child who is born the way you're born. You just are. That's your norm. You have no idea that anybody else in the world is experiencing the world any differently than you are. That's just who you are. Who is constantly, I'm exaggerating, but we don't so much see children who stagger, but we certainly do see children who are jiggly and wiggly all the time. And you've asked them to stop and they don't. And then you ask them slightly more firmly to stop and they don't. Or maybe they do for a few seconds and then pretty soon they're going again. We can assume that the child is being willfully irritating, defiant, and it's never that. It is never that. It is that there's something going on in the sensory system that is so huge that the strongest intention to please and to do the good, right thing is overridden by this sensory need and this physical drive. And it's not something that the child can manage. So when we see these children, so I just did a workshop in Spring Valley, and my workshop was called Dear Child, Your Wiggling and Jiggling is Driving Me Mad. How can I escort you to health? You're not bad. Which is really, that's our theme as therapeutic support educators in this. And so much of it has to do here. It has to do there. Which tomorrow, that's going to be our meat and potatoes. And we hope to put a cherry on the dessert at the end when we've done all of that. So we have a nice chocolate sundae with whipped cream and a cherry. Okay. But then we've got all this stuff over here too. And so we want to fill this out because it all is so interdependent. Now, Rudolf Steiner, of this 12, he divided them and he organized them many different ways at different times, depending upon the insight that he wished to share with his audience. But one of the first ways that he described these, and here's something that I find fascinating too. I mean, I love Rudolf Steiner. I'm totally astonished every time I come to read something again or something new, to see things that he said over 100 years ago that modern neurology and magnetic, the MRIs and kind of things, is confirming is true. So many things that he was really, in a way, he was prophetic in his understanding of these things. And so this is a way he organized. These we call the bodily senses, the foundational senses. Lower senses, not meaning inferior, just that they're the ones that are low down, that everything else rests on, is what it's talking about. Then he talked about these, which are more familiar to us except for warmth. So we've got smell. We're also finding children who are very smell sensitive. I had a little boy, one of the most amazing children I've ever met, who was really sensitive to smells. And he was really, he was sensitive to a lot of things. And in his classroom, the children always washed their dishes after snack. And he refused to do that. And the teacher said, come along, Evan, let's go do that. And he says, I can't. And she said, sure you can. And he says, no, when I look at the water with any kind of thing floating in it, it makes me feel sick. And she said, bourgeois. And they went over to it, and he got to there, and then he started to go, whoa. Okay, you're right. You don't need to wash your dish. It's okay. That visually for him, and then smell. So he was very, very sensitive to touch. And so he could not wear socks. And so there are a lot of kids, which are the ones that are the really nice sheepskin ones, can't remember what they are, doesn't matter a bit, but sheepskin boots with a sheepskin lining. There are a lot of children who are like this, who can't wear socks, and so they wear those barefooted. So this boy would come to me, and he'd take his shoes off, and then there was something that I'll show you tomorrow about a special sort of massage that required for me to tug on his feet while he was in a hammock. And my smell sensitivity was being strongly affected. And so I had bought a hand soap. And so I would go and wash my hands so after I'd touched his feet. And then suddenly he started to sort of go, and I said, Evan, what's wrong? And he says, there's a smell. Well, it was the smell of the perfume on my hands, and even my touching his hand then, having washed mine, and he went like that. That was overwhelming to him. It was truly overwhelming. So we know that smell is one of the really interesting senses because it's the only one that's wired directly into the brain, goes directly from the nose to the olfactory bulb. and is directly perceived without any filtering at all. And that how smells can evoke strong memories in us. You can't very well conjure up a smell, though I think I can. I read that you can't, but I can remember smells. I remember the smell of my grandmother's powder, which puff tissues smelled like. And the smell of my best friend's home, whose Syrian mother cooked Middle Eastern food, and there were smells there that were really foreign to me. But anyway, lots of strong memories. And when you smell something, you're starting to get a little bit of a sense of the insideness of that thing. If it smells good or bad or neutral or so on. But we're starting to experience something about the quality of something out external to ourselves through the smell. Then we get to taste. Taste is and smell. I mean, you can't not smell. You could do this for a while, and then even then, somehow the smell will start to filter in through your breathing through your mouth. You'll still get a ugh if you're trying to avoid it. Yeah, but taste is a little bit. We have a little more control over taste because we know when we've tried to feed a baby, and they're not going to do it. You just can't get anything in that child's mouth. Or if you do, then you're sorry because it will come spewing out at you. But at least taste, we can block things off a little bit. Because we're taking something of the external world more intimately into ourselves if we taste it. And then we generally, once we taste it, either we'll spit it out because it's icky, or we'll chew it up and we'll swallow it. So we're taking more of the world into ourselves through our taste. Sight, we can close our eyes. We can do that. And one thing about sight, I'll just tell you a little bit about this, because the importance and the powerfulness of sensory experiences is huge. So much more than we are aware of, and so much more than is generally appreciated by the world. Rudolf Steiner describes, again, take it however you can make sense out of this, is that so visual impressions come into the eye, and they register at the back of the eye, at the retina. And that's back there is where the blood vessels are. And that the visual impression literally is absorbed by the blood and is carried out into the body. Okay. So think of the things that we see all the time. And we are constantly bombarded by visual images. Few of them are nice. Few of them are thoughtful. Most of them are advertising, commercial culture kind of stuff, are manipulated. They're arranged to create a particular impression on us because those who have done their research, their marketing research, and their psychological studies know how to use color and arrangement of various things to create an inner experience in ourselves to make us be more inclined to do what these commercially oriented people would like us to do, which is spend money on their stuff. So we're bombarded by all of that, and then if we just take this as an imagination, that it's possible that a visual image could actually flow into ourselves, be carried in the most subtle way by the bloodstream. What's that doing to us? Because that's going everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It's not just limited to right out there. So sight is, through sight we can both protect ourselves by closing our eyes, but then we reach out and things reach sort of into us as well, that it's hard to be aware of all of the different things that come to us peripherally. Things that, this is a horrible thing to tell you, but I'm going to tell you this because it makes the point so dramatically. A family who I know many years ago, who moved away, fourth grader. The little girl in her school at a play date with somebody the child had access to a computer and she saw pornography. And this child is shredded, is emotionally shredded. And one of the things that she said, and she's in therapy, they're doing everything they possibly can to help her digest this traumatic experience. She said, "I wish I could tear out my eyes." Because that's where she had the experience. So it's no small thing. The quality, the character of each of our sensory experiences, and in this very, very dramatic, and I'll probably regret that I told you that because it's so extreme. But it's living in my gut. I can't walk away from it. To say why, what, as an educator, as a parent, as a human being who cares about the welfare of children, to just not be so enraged that people would do stuff like that. And so how do we protect our children from those so that they have a fair chance of growing up to be healthy people who are not damaged by this thoughtless stuff out there? Okay, we get to warmth. Now, we say, well, isn't that touch? Well, kind of, sort of, but not really. Steiner said that there was a particular ability to sense temperature that was different from touch. And now it's been discerned that there are touch receptors for temperature in addition to touch receptors for touch. And warmth is really important. We have to maintain our body temperatures at a certain level to be healthy. It can't be too cool, can't be too hot. So we have to have some kind of a way of monitoring our sense of temperature and warmth. And then the temperature of warmth external to ourselves. So through our individual senses of warmth, we experience whether something is warmer or cooler or the same temperature range as ourselves. And depending upon whether it's a hot summer day and you feel something cool and you say, "Oh, yum." I remember a friend saying she grew up in Tennessee. It was just, the summers were just indescribably horrible, and how she and her siblings would go out into the garage and lie down on the concrete slab floor because it was cool until it heated up and they'd move over. When it's really cold, and yesterday, Kansas cold is colder than Colorado cold, I'll tell you. And I wore today every layer I had, and I was fine. But yesterday, after being out in the play yard for about a half an hour, my fingers were not numb, but that part was pretty much. So coming into the warmth then is very pleasurable. And so it's nice. Is it an inviting warmth? Is it too hot? Got to stay away. Is it a pleasant cooling and helping us to feel more comfortable when it's really hot? Or is it too cold? You don't want it. And this becomes, and this is a bridging sense here, because it is something physical, but it's more than that. Because we can walk into a room and we can sense the mood of the room. Does it feel cool? Do I want to walk in there? Ooh, it's cold, it's icy, no thank you. Is it warmly inviting? Would I like to be in there? Does this person have warmth? Oh, would I like to know that person? Ooh, this person feels kind of icy. I don't know. We're moving into much, much more subtle, less physical, but still totally valid sensing. And Steiner says it's the fact that we have a sense of warmth, that we can know that we can know if it's what the temperature differential is, both literally, physically, socially, emotionally, psychically, psychologically. He called these the middle senses, and he also called these the senses through which we come to know the world. Then we've got these. Well, hearing, hearing, yeah. But hearing is a gateway to a whole nother world. We can hear, we have the physical ability to hear. We know that. But through hearing, there are all kinds of other activities that occur. And these are the things that really make us human beings and give us the possibility of relating to one another. And that's primarily through language. Now that's to say, deaf children, deaf people have language. They don't have the physical hearing capacity of the ear, but they have all of the capacities that hearing provides that leads into wakening these other senses. Now here's the thing that's a little tricky. And I still kind of go flip-flop, 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 got it, oh no, I don't understand it. Yes, I do, no, I don't. Like the picture of the vase, you look at it, it's the vase, one minute, and the next minute it's the old crone. Mm-hmm. And then you don't know when it's flipping, and you know both are true, but which is the true one? Well, I feel like that about these sometimes. So Steiner says that there's also, so we've got hearing, and we have, this, in the realm of understanding how people relate to the world, how they take information in, how they process it, and how they relate back outward to it. It's in this whole realm that's now called auditory processing. And so somebody says something, so it goes in there. And some of us, it registers really fast. And for others of us, it may kind of take a snaky road in there. Now, as my brain is aging, I'm experiencing this. It's not so much with responding to things I hear as it is to finding the memory of, I know that person's name. Please let me know it in less than 10 minutes so I can respond and not embarrass myself and her. Okay, but anyway, but for some people it takes longer. And then it takes longer to process it, and it doesn't necessarily mean think about it, and then to formulate a response to it and have that come out. And that might take a long time too. And we tend to think that that person is cognitively slow. That's a judgment that's unfounded. The person is just experiencing the world differently and finding their way in and their way out. It just takes more time. That's really important because we're seeing more and more children who need more time. It's not a visible thing. We just want to say, I ask you that question, are you going to answer me or not? Yes. And then comes the answer, but it may be so delayed that we think it's not coming and we've already moved on. And so for a child who's struggling with this, how difficult that is, because by the time the child has processed and has an answer, the class has already moved on. And so then he or she has to start all over again on the next thing that's going to take a long time. So we've got hearing and processing, and that moves on to this word. Now Steiner said that we recognize speech, that we recognize sounds as speech when we hear it is a sense that we're born with. It's a sensing capacity. It's not that we think it. So when we have little children and we know that they understand, they get the meaning of what we say to them before they have language. How do they do that? It's because they have a sensory capacity to recognize that language is language. Again, I was in New York recently, and you just hear every language all over the place. And I know that they're languages. I know they're legitimate languages. I don't understand them at all. But I recognize the languageness of those sounds. We all do that. And Steiner says it's a sensing that we do that. And then the thought, okay, so this is that we recognize that other people are speaking words. And then this is not that I can think. It's not the capacity of ourselves to think, but it's that I can sense that how other people use words and organize those words fits together to create an idea. And he says that's a sense, a sensing. It's not a thinking. And now here's the crown. This is often called the sense of ego. I've chosen to not put it that way because that word ego is so confoundedly confused and convoluted with a lot of different people's ideas about what that means. But It's that I can stand here in front of you and I can look out and I have the sensory experience of each one of you as another egoity, another human being. I can sense the personhood of you and you can sense the personhood of the other people around us. How is it that a baby knows to look at a human face and not a monkey? They do. Research proves it's true. That they will seek out the human face. There's something of a sensing capacity. It's not a thinking. It's not experience. It's an innate sensing. Now, and this is where we're really trying to get to. This is really what the future of our civilization and the world as we know it, which we hope will improve, but it's probably going to decline first. I don't know. I don't watch the news. I keep my optimism by being with children. How we are able to come to use our hearing, and that means leaning into to listen into the other, to listen into, to lean into the intention of the other with interest, not just waiting for you to shut up so I can tell you what I think. Political debates. So that I really can try to participate in understanding what it is that you're wanting to say to me. And not jump to conclusions, and to honor what the other brings forth. And that I can honor the thought without rejecting it. I can grasp the thought. I can recognize that you are expressing a thought as I am striving to express my own thoughts. And we sense them. And then after we've sensed them, then we can think about them as to whether we agree, we disagree, what question might I ask so that I can come to better understand what it is that you're wanting to communicate to me. And through that, then, to recognize with honor the beinghood of the other person. That's a great striving. A great striving. All the great thinkers, all the great philosophers, all the great religions, they're all striving to help us find ways to live in this combination of I and thou. Now, Steiner did another thing it's so fascinating, and this will help to tie together why, what we're going to be focusing on so much tomorrow, these are so important, so utterly important. He says that there's a relationship between these senses and these senses. And he says, let's see, I'll go at it this way. The sense of balance is related to the sense of hearing. Well, simply on a physical level, the whole apparatus for balance, for hearing, for the beginning of auditory processing, going into through the cochlea, the inner ear, going to the auditory parts of the brain, to the verbal parts of the brain. We can see that, well, these are related. What we also know is that if children have chronic ear infections, then often their hearing is affected. They might miss if they've got an ear infection specifically. If it's kind of a low-grade one that doesn't really show itself as an inflammation and there are no symptoms, and the child just hears how he hears, she hears, and she doesn't know that the hearing might be dulled, so that it goes undetected, that there are certain moments of critical sensitivity for language development, and if that's blocked off or dulled, then language development then, sound discrimination, ability to connect sounds to letters, reading, writing. That's kind of a big chain, isn't it? That we will see that there can be balance is affected often. kids who've had chronic ear infections often have really compromised balance. They have compromised balance, and they may have compromised auditory processing capacities. So from a physical level, we can see that. He said that self-movement is related to word and speech. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. I'm going to just give you the skeleton tonight, because I want to pass out. Would you start those around, please? Pass these out as well. That life is related, our sense of life, well-being, related to our ability to perceive thought. And that touch is related to the sensitivity that we will develop in perceiving the other human being. Now, I guess it was in the 60s, the old days. Then there was on television, the Hallmark Hall of Fame, which was really probably the best television that was on. And but Hallmark Cards sponsored it, and their slogan for many years was "Reach out and touch someone." I thought they had somebody really smart who'd really figured something out. So touching through, of course, buying their cards and sending their cards. But whether we have sensitive touch really often has affects our capacity to sense the being of the other person. That we can talk about people being thin-skinned. Well, a thin-skinned person might be hard to live with because he or she is so sensitive. But it might also be that same person who can live empathetically and compassionately into the experience of someone else, too. As a kind of non-physical touching to can sense the other one. That there was okay, you did all that. A child in our class, he's one of the reasons that I do this work. He's one of the most complicated children I've ever met. One of the most challenging to find a way, I don't know what the right word is, I'll just use the word to manage in the classroom. Oh gosh. His story was, okay, well first I have to tell you about him. He was kind of this absolutely ragtag old boy who would only wear sweatpants. He was just always, his clothes were loose and his pants were twisted and his socks could have been on upside down, and he often had his boots on the wrong feet, but he would only wear really loose boots that he could pull on or off, and he didn't have to do anything fine motor to really get them on. And he was a maniac. And the way he charged around the classroom, to call him a crasher and a basher was just so inadequate a description. This boy was like a moving tornado. And he never noticed any collisions with other children. One day he was running out on the playground and there was a log and he fell over the log and he hit his shin. And I would have been on crutches for 3 weeks if I had done that to myself. A goose egg swelled up on his shin right away, and he kind of looked at it and he went running off, as though he didn't feel it. It didn't. Well, found out, and so other things like how there was a brick in the play yard, I don't know, but there was. It was pre-paranoia days, fortunately, but no one was hurt. But he picked up the brick. He's standing right by the swing set. He just went. It didn't hit on anybody, but oh my goodness, it might have done. And he was oblivious. He was utterly oblivious. Well, it turns out this is his birth story. His mother was in labor for 36 hours and did not dilate. By the time they finally figured everything out, she was what's known as a DES baby. Her mother had been given a hormone during the pregnancy with her to prevent premature dilation of the cervix. It turns out that the female children of women who were given this hormone will not dilate in labor. So it took 36 hours, and finally they realized that the child was in enormous fetal distress. He was delivered by C-section. He had meconium aspiration. He even had like little burns in his lungs from the meconium, and he was in ICU for quite a little while. This is my theory, is that I think that he shut down his sensory systems in there in order to survive. He couldn't, though the mother was contracting, he couldn't stand it anymore. And I think his touch was so overwhelmed by the experience that he's entered into this life that it hardly functions for him. What we call very, very thick-skinned, kind of descriptively. And certainly thick-skinned in his behavior, that he just couldn't sense or make any sense out of why is everybody upset about this? Throwing a brick? It was great for my proprioception. I really got a good experience out of that. So we can see these things that this one, what's physical here, becomes social, even kind of a spiritual sensing in these higher domains. If these things are not going well, all of this will probably be compromised. Because it's just like any building, it's the foundation, the dedication of good materials and strength, and taking time to not rush it, to let it develop well, is what the rest of the building is going to stand upon. And that's all of this. That's all of this. Now, we have 15 minutes, and I had planned to stop talking at least 15 minutes ago. But what I want to point out to you is, of the sheets that you received, there are two particularly. There's one that says activities to support body awareness, and there's one that says activities to support healthy balance. So the question is, and why I want to give you as much practical stuff as I can, is that there are so many things that we can do as parents and grandparents. I'm going to do first grade readies on my grandchildren in France when we go to visit in April. Just to see how are they developing. And to see, well, what could we boost here? Do we need to put in little boosts? There are lots of things that we can do. The one that says balance, support healthy balance, gives you a list of all the different kinds of movements that are natural to childhood, that stimulate the balance system. And so here's the thing about all of this sensory development, about all of this neurological development. It's that through regular, rhythmic repetition of experience, the nerve pathways are myelinated. Myelin is a fatty substance, mostly cholesterol, that acts as the insulation, like on an electric wire. When a nerve pathway is myelinated, that means that the nerve transmission can go really fast without anyone having to think about it. When we're learning a new skill, we have to think our way through it. And for a child who's learning something new, it's called motor planning. We all do motor planning. But for most children, then pretty soon they've done it enough, and the pathway is myelinated, and then they can just do it without thought. And when they don't have to think about it, that means that there's all this mental activity available to pay attention to what Mr. De Leon is offering up here on the blackboard. If those pathways are not myelinated and the child is having to consciously think about it, sitting still, or override the impulse to move, or being distracted and only flashing in and out here and there when Mr. De Leon is speaking about them, because, they're twitching and and they're distracted, all of those things, that's really going to be a disadvantage for that child. So, to have as much chance as possible to really get that healthy and strong is what this list is about. I would say that when I make recommendations to families, and it's rare that there's a child whose balance system is really healthy. There are a few, but most everybody even if it's comparatively good, it never does any harm to try and encourage more opportunity for the children to strengthen that. And it only comes through this repetition. So there are lots of things in there, and these are simple things that you can do. Simple things. You look at them and you kind of say, well, what's in your home environment? What can you do at the park? What kind of games can you play? You can play these particular games with your children, and we're going to do a little bit tomorrow of some of these things to help you limber your adult self up, to be more playful. Get down on the floor, if that's what it takes to engage your children, to get them. When an adult acts silly, what is more inviting to a child? I don't know. But for us to enter into them and help to engage them. That's the first one. And then the other one is on body awareness. That really has to do with body geography and this whole idea of self-movement, this proprioception. In general, for the vestibular, and we practice that, anytime we move the head in the different directions, we are engaging balance. Anytime we move in a circle, anytime we spin, anytime we invert our head like that, any of those things, when we rock, and we'll practice that tomorrow, a little game of rocking on the floor, any of those things then stimulates the vestibular system and gives it a chance to strengthen itself. So there's just the whole idea of circling, going round and round, spinning, so on, rocking, cradling, all of those things. Those are all healthy things. Why is a baby satisfied when, colic? I never thought I'd have a colicky baby. It's 3 a.m. And somehow or another, the rocking chair doesn't do it either. You have to be on your feet. How do they know you sat down? I don't know. How do they know that? But they know. So that's why those things are satisfying, because it's stimulating the balance system, which is soothing. Okay? The other kind of rule of thumb for proprioception, for self-movement, is whenever you put pressure, either by pulling or pushing into a limb, then you're stimulating the sense of self-movement and educating those proprioceptive spindles in each of the joints, so that the child then knows where the parts of the body are, experiences them, and then can say, oh, that's where my arms are. Great, great, great. Again and again. And so that would be to carry heavy things, to push heavy things, to pull heavy things, to jump. Jumping rope, jumping off a chair. With the combination, the ideal combination, a whole bunch of stumps of irregular heights. And so you're walking on them and having to change levels. That's vestibular balance. And then if you have to jump off, that's proprioception. And so if you've very, very strategically placed all of these, you can get so much sensory input going in a short little episode of a kind of an obstacle course. These are not high-tech things at all. They're incredibly simple. But the powerfulness and the importance of how much benefit, I said importance, but I want to say the potency of how much benefit we can offer to our children is huge. Now, now, for those of you who will be here tomorrow, I have to put this in. Last spring, at Easter time, I was at an international Waldorf teachers conference in Switzerland, which was about development, child development, and particularly important kind of nodal points like the transition from kindergarten to the grade school, 6-7 year change. And then there's what's called the 9-year change that some of you may have experienced. I mean, we all did it ourselves, but with our own children. And then at 12, there's another change, and so on. But among the things that were there, that was a kind of sort of little side conversations about development, and one was entitled "Preventing Addiction," and it was a doctor, an anthroposophic doctor, a grades teacher, and a kindergarten teacher. And I happened to know all of those people who were presenting, and I said, well, I wonder what they're going to say. Well, I have to say that it's changed my life, and it's changed my sense of mission in sharing these ideas. This is going to be a little chilling. So what the doctor said is, how come that we have a lot of young people who experiment with substances, all the way from, alcohol, marijuana, other psychotropic drugs, et cetera, and now, heroin is becoming a street drug that's affordable, but the stakes rise very high, very fast. But she said, a lot of young people experiment, but they don't become addicted. And then there are some who do. And I think it's the greatest evil and tragedy of modern life. I do. The waste, the unbelievable, inexpressible waste of human lives when young people become addicted. So what's the difference? What's the difference? And the difference, said the doctor, the difference, said the class teacher, the difference, said the early childhood educator, is that those children who have well-developed senses, well-developed orientation in the world, because they have been active, they have been doing things, they have not been passive observers, they have hauled and chopped wood in whatever way fits into their context. They have played. They have not been entertained. They have really, it's what Steiner calls educating the will. And tomorrow I'm going to read to you from the pedagogical lecture that he gave to the first Waldorf teachers, very powerful, about the education of the will. That these children who have had the experience to educate and strengthen their wills have such a stronger personhood that is the most profound preventative for addictive behaviors that we can possibly offer. That means iPads. That means screens. That means every kind of technological gadget that makes our children sit passively and think that that's doing something. It's not. What I'll say to you, this is where I get very impassioned. And I'm not apologizing for it at this point. So, all right, so I go to New York City every year, and I do developmental assessments for grade school entrance there at the Manhattan School. And I was warned one year that there were a number of 6-year-old girls who were taking ballet in a very serious way. New York City. Everything's serious in New York City. So I don't particularly approve of ballet for young children. And so when I saw these little girls, then I was really annoyed that their movement was so lovely. They had shoot. That doesn't give me anything to, to carry my banner forward to say, free, open movement, no rules, no, no, yes, there's a right way or a wrong way. No, just move, find your body, find your way in the world. But then they offered to me something enormously helpful. They were amazingly skilled and talented and beautiful in the movement of the things they had practiced. But then when there were some little things that are an ordinary human kid movement things that they had not practiced, they were not skilled. There were holes, I would call it, hollow spaces in their development. And what we're trying to do, and what the intention of the human being is to do, is to fill out the whole space of the body, the whole space of the soul, the mind, the spirit. And they're pockets of emptiness. Now, when I travel a lot, I spend a lot of time in airports, and boy, do you see what the society is doing. People don't talk, they don't read. I mean, some do. There may be 20% of us who are readers, but everybody's doing something like that. And when I'm at the grocery store or IKEA, you see the children in the carts, the 1.5-year-olds on their little pads, and everybody says, aren't they clever? How smart are they? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but look, it's going from here to here. Here to here, that's it. And what about all of this space? It's not getting filled up. It's being allowed to lie fallow and be undeveloped. So, I send you off to dreamland with this consideration. And on the one hand, it's very daunting to consider that what seems so silly, like playing, moving, balancing, running, skipping rope, huh? You mean that's really important? Hugely, hugely, hugely. And the world is denying our children a normal childhood opportunity to explore those things that used to be just kiddom. And so we have to do something about that if we want to give our children a real good chance. That's the daunting part. It's not going to happen just by living a life in our modern times. But the fantastic part is that knowing these things, we have the opportunity to make up an enormous hollowness that the world is trying to masquerade toward our children as being a fun and satisfying life in a virtual way. And we don't want that for them. So tomorrow we're going to get very practical. We're going to talk a lot about these senses in particular, self-movement and balance, both about why they are so important, what they offer to the children developmentally, how many things are based upon them, to talk about some descriptions of when things are not developing in the most healthy way and the child is showing us signs of distress. What might those be? All children will show us some of those signs at some times, but some children carrying them along in their backpack every day. And then we will do some very silly things. Okay? Thank you so much. I'll see you in the morning.